Thank you, Last caller. I do care about the environment, but I also care about the people. My job as a public representative is to represent the people that have elected me to come here, to represent them. And just to make this come home to you, do you know how many briquettes are in a bale of briquettes? There's 22. That's what I get reminded by people in the area that I live in, because there's people, pensioners, that are putting so many briquettes away per day to heat their home and heat their house, to keep them warm. That's how serious this is when they're counting the briquettes in a bale of briquettes. You look at every rural person through the failure of this government and the previous governments for the lack of infrastructure in their areas in transport, that this is why we now have a problem that has shown up, that anyone outside of the Red Cow is showing up that they don't have transport. You're going to go back to Kerry and you're going to see people in your area want to know why they can't buy a lorry load or a trailer load of turf to keep them warm. How are you going to face them? How are you going to face your own people and tell them that you're backing Eamon Ryan, who is for the birds, and I don't mean to make that personal, but he's not with reality, and you're backing somebody in your party? I want you to ask your government this evening to let you have a free vote and let you vote for your people that elected you and put you here to represent them. Because we've no alternatives in this country, we buy a car. We pay VRT in the car, increased VRT now when you buy a car. You pay motor tax, you pay fuel, you pay tax on the fuel. You pay tax on the servicing of the car because there is no alternatives. Again, I'm all for the environment, but give me alternatives. You haven't given alternatives. We have no alternatives. Because all you want to do is increase the population, the likes of Dublin, put infrastructure into Dublin, get extra TDs then in the areas where you've more population, so you can further take away the representation from rural Ireland. That's what you're about. It's controlling to get you back into government again. Every person that lives in the city now originated one time or another from the county. And we're asking the people in the cities now to help protect the areas that they came from the likes of government that are out of touch with reality. They're actually making their backbenchers vote for stuff that they don't agree with themselves. Because if they did agree with it, they can't go back and face their electorate, like you'll have to do, like all the rest of the backbenchers, TDs, are going to have to do. I've said this already. I was on radio during the week where I was accused of not knowing what I'm talking about when it came to introducing grants for energy. But when the TD that was on that time with me, Niall Collins, was questioned himself, it turned around that he didn't know what he was talking about, because 70% of the people in County Limerick rely on solid fuel and oil. But the grants are there for what? Gas and electricity. I was in a house, and God rest the person, their daughter's been buried today. 2 elderly people. And they said, Richard, we're 100% reliant on oil. Because they said physically we can't go out and bring in coal or blocks or whatever else. We need to heat our home. And I called to their house to sympathise with them because I couldn't be there. And they had to have the house warm because there was people calling that night. And it was the one concern that they had, that they're completely reliant on oil because they are not able to go out the back to bring in a few blocks or a bit of coal or a bit of turf. A record 7.1 billion in tax revenue was collected in March. 2.4 billion, or 52.4% more than the same period in 2021. You've never had as much money in the coffers as you have now. So who is being penalised all the time? It's a person from the county. We've no alternative but to drive a car because we've no transport. Who pays the most carbon tax? A person in the county, because they have no alternative. That's why you're punishing, and you've forgotten about. That's why you've got to scrap carbon tax until you have alternatives put in place. And I'm all for alternatives. But alternatives need investment in the counties, towns and villages in our areas. It's been failure of this government and the previous governments that we haven't got this. Storage plants haven't been updated in 30 years. And it's more so now when we have people now from Ukraine that you can't house them in the counties because there's no infrastructure. Failure of this government and previous government. I'll be watching what way you're voting on this evening, and I will be telling every constituency in your area to watch what you're doing this evening.